Greetings all. This is Hairy Nick. How are you guys going? It's here. X-Wing 2nd Edition has launched. We have all had a chance to have a go at it. Well, at least I hope that you guys have so far. I don't know about you guys, but my local gaming store here at General Games had a launch night. We had a tournament. It was really good fun. I know that there's the launch party kits going around. Some of the distributions taking a bit longer than usual. That is indeed the case here in Australia. We'll be getting our launch kits out next week, but in the meantime, we can't wait. We've already had some tournaments, some casual play, and it's been a lot of fun. In the comment section below, guys, have you been to any launch parties, launch events? The first time we get to officially use the real content of X-Wing 2nd Edition. How have you found it? What have you found that works well? What's the first list you flew? Please let me know in the comments. And this is what this video is going to be about, just talking about my first experience with 2nd Edition proper. And I will say before anything else, yes, we'll just get the negative stuff out of the way. Yes, we only just got the app. Yes, it's an absolute mess. I know. Let's not get into that too much. Actually, in the next video I'm going to make, I will talk about alternatives to the app. I think the takeaway from this is, look, it doesn't really matter that much for us in franchise players because, yes, we have yet another squad builder and all those things already in existence to do this kind of stuff. It just sucks that the app that we have, is sort of the face of X-Wing, and yes, it's buggy and it's what newer players are sort of drawn towards. And when they have things like squad points and upgrade slots not working, that's not really ideal. But anyway, more about that in the next video. Let's talk about what I flew and what I came up against, what I found was interesting, what I think was powered well, what surprised me, what didn't surprise me. And here on the screen in front of us is what I flew. Yes, I just had to try dual fire sprays. It's a lot of fun. Look, in terms of the power level of the list, I will say I did feel like this list will do better with practice. It didn't perform that well. I went 2-1 in this tournament. However, I feel like both of these pilots could do a lot better if I just tweak things slightly. In fact, let's talk about this build for the time being. We have Boba Fett here with Fearless, L337, Contraband Cybernetics, Marauder and the Han Solo Gunner card, and Eamon Azamine with Homing Missile, Cad Bane, Proton Bombs, Rigged Cargo Chute, and Raster and Seismic Charges. And let's talk about Boba Fett first because I'm a huge fan of this card. Was in first edition, even though he wasn't really all that powerful. The addition of the white boost alone is huge on the fire spray. It is huge when your pilot cares about being at range 1 of your opponent. And in first edition, engine upgrade was always what I put on Boba Fett for that very reason. I also was a big fan of Fearlessness in first edition, and I feel like in second edition, it's not quite what this pilot wants to be doing. I found using Fearless, it just didn't trigger enough for my liking. I feel like for 3 points in the talent slot, we can be doing a little bit better, so I will be changing that and playing around with it. Maybe even thinking about something like Predator or Lone Wolf. I'm not too sure what to do here right now. Fearlessness, I just don't think was pulling its weight. I think it triggered once in the entire tournament. Contraband Cybernetics was interesting. Not having to stress your own ships is very powerful. It means if you have a stress token, you can still use the reinforce. You can Talon roll and reinforce, which is very interesting. You can Talon roll and boost. It didn't have a lot of utility in the games I played, but it definitely has a higher ceiling than I'm giving it credit for. Han Solo was very interesting. Now, I rated this card really highly at all my reviews of it. Putting it on Boba Fett, I just found that there was a little bit of an issue here. I found the problem was, I wanted to focus anyway as my one and only action. The only other thing I would consider doing in a lot of situations is reinforce. But you can't reinforce and use Han Solo in the same turn, and that really sucks. I found he was very interesting in instances where Boba Fett activated before and after other ships in your opponent's squads. It means you can sort of assess where you are. It means you can have a focus on defense or offense. You get a bit more information in terms of the order of how everyone's shot. A very interesting interaction. The one thing that Han Solo does very interestingly is it gives you a focus on the fly during combat, and the value of that changes based on when Boba Fett shoots. What I will say was fantastic was L3, and I thought L3 was going to be good, but the value of this is really good for 4 points. Now, look, there are going to be situations where you use L3 and you're going to improve the quality of your opponent's dice. I think I approached this correctly. I only ever used L3 when the opponent was rolling better than normal odds. I think, for example, there was 2 times in particular. My opponent rolled 4 dice, got 3 hits, L3 down to 1 hit. My opponent rolled 3 dice, got a hit crit. Made him re-roll down to 1 hit, and that felt really, really good. Negating damage is fantastic, and then the utility on the back of L3, getting those green banks, is really, really solid, especially when you have to make sure you boost every turn. When you're getting away and trying to turn around, it opens up Han Solo a bit more, which is really, really good. And I think the key with what I'm trying to go for here is just making sure we have a lot of utility. And maybe that's the main reason I don't like Fearless. I don't think it really works with what I'm trying to do. So that's the one I'm really looking at changing. I do want to try this with Slave 1 as well. I think that's a very interesting option, especially considering that the engine upgrade is burnt into the ship. I didn't take note while I was playing of how often I would use Slave 1 if I had the option. But especially against aces, I feel like that is going to be relevant. The fact that you get that old Imperial Boba Fett ability without having to lose the Scum pilot ability is very, very relevant. And especially considering the Scum ability cares about range. There's a lot of things I want to play around with here, but Boba Fett is a fantastic brawler at 99 points. This is really solid. Also solid, Eamon Azameen. Very, very happy with this. But the reason I lost my first game is because I basically lost him with all the ordnance on board. And then in the second and third game, I went, okay, I'm just going to put Boba Fett out front and make sure he brawls first. And that, right out of the gate, was a much better strategy. So just learning things for the time being. This is definitely a list that takes a lot of learning. And what I found so valuable with Eamon Azameen, proton bombs and seismic charges. Now, I recently reviewed a list where I wasn't convinced about protons and seismics, and one of the reasons I did this because people sort of tried to convince me, but then you get the flexibility of one hits a mine and one doesn't, and I thought, okay, well, I'll try it out myself, and I have completely gone 180 on this issue, guys. Protons and seismic alongside each other is so valuable, especially on Eamon Azameen, because he has the ability to put the bombs in different places. That was just so valuable during the game. Especially against swarms and aces. I came up against one ace list in particular, and I had to try and catch Suntafel as best as I could. And the idea that I can hook a proton bomb close to a rock or a seismic charge which will hit the rock, I get like these 2 zone bubbles which I can choose, which is so relevant. You want all the bombing choices possible when you're taking on aces. And it just felt really good and powerful. Now, it didn't feel like it was blanking out the aces like before. It's not like PS10 Captain Nim, which just goes after every ace and just blanks them out in bomblets and just, feel bad situation for aces. It did not feel like my opponent was without options, and that's a key thing here. But that flexibility, the ability to have that much flexibility and it still feel balanced with bombs is just fantastic. How many missiles I just slapped on there because I wanted to try it out. I didn't really rate this card very highly when it was revealed. I still don't, to be honest. It just didn't feel like it was that impactful. Giving your opponents choices over 2 negative effects that you can inflict upon them is generally not a great thing in gaming, like not just X-Wing, but games in general. And that's what I found with Homing Missile. Being able to take 1 damage. For example, I fired it at a Wedge Antilles. He had 2 health left, and my opponent just took 1 damage. That doesn't feel very good. That actually feels really bad. Basically investing all of that to not be able to take your opponent's ship off the board, not potentially get across 2 or 3 or 4 damage sucks in some situations. It's great in other situations, like against Suntafel. Oddly enough, the one chance I had to fire it against the Suntafel, it just didn't work out. My opponent just took the risk, took the 4 dice, and it didn't get hit because of the way he was positioned. It's a very circumstantial card. Even at 3 points and 2 shots, I'm not convinced by this. I think next time when I fly Eamon, I might look at investing in another missile, maybe like a cluster or something like that. Bit of experimentation to do here. I do want to make sure that I use a missile with Eamon because I want to improve his combat efficiency. And having Andrasta with the reload, I feel like it's a little bit wasteful if you just use Andrasta for 1 more bomb. The reload did come up in a few different situations for bombs and the missile. It's great having that choice. I mean, it sucks it doesn't do all of them, but that would be too powerful moving into the second edition. Just doing one weapon at a time makes the most sense. Cad Bane was so good. Getting that flexibility in actions is very, very powerful. I will say, though, I do think he'll be way better on a Skirg Bomber because the Skirg Bomber doesn't already have white boosts. The Fire Spray does. However, being able to use Cad Bane, do a blue maneuver, and then take another action is fantastic. In fact, the only card I was not happy in this list with Rigged Cargo Chute, I never used it in one of my 3 games. I felt the zoning tactics I got out of just using the bombs was enough. Rigged Cargo Chute, yeah, I just put it on there just to see how it would go. I thought, oh, well, if I have that much zoning with the bombs and I just amplify that by putting Rigged Cargo Chute, I'll be able to really control where my opponent flies. I didn't need anything more after the bombs. That's what I discovered. And I think what I really need to do with Eamon Azameen is improve his combat efficiency, because just rolling 3 dice on offense, 2 dice on defense, and not giving him any rerolls or powering out tokens hurt him a bit too much. I feel very much that the Fire Spray has continued its trend from first edition, where you really just can't make it a dedicated bomber. You do need to make it combat efficient enough. It's not cheap enough to just be a dedicated bomber. And I feel like something like Lone Wolf or maybe another illicit slot. Honestly, I just take out the illicit, put something like Lone Wolf, maybe Predator. There's options here. There's options. But bottom line is the Fire Spray feels really, really good to play. That medium-sized base, shockingly, can now fit in the weirdest of gaps. Being able to fly through swarms, just little things like that. Yes, the reach has been deducted slightly, but it also means you can move a bit more finitely. With Boba Fett, yes, with a larger base, you have a larger bubble zone to activate his ability. I actually found the slightly smaller base was more useful because I could get a bit more precision in the way he moved. So I actually don't think there's really any practical downside with them losing the size of their base. In fact, I think it's pretty much just upside. And I was super happy with the list. Yes, I know I didn't do very well, but I think there are definitely improvements to make. And it definitely feels like a list that will improve with skill the more I practice with it, which is really the key thing with X-Wing. You're not going to start winning tournaments with a brand new list. I mean, I know everyone in this tournament, for example, had brand new lists. But then again, there are lists that are better for beginners, better for people who have practiced them more. And I really didn't make a point of just flying a list that I thought was just going to spike a tournament. I played a list that played around with different things that I really wanted to try out. In terms of what I flew against, I do want to have a quick chat about that as well. Because in the day, I flew against a couple of Imperial Ace lists, a Palpace list, just a dedicated Ace list, and a Rebel Jank list, like a 4 Rebels. And they were all really interesting to fly against. And 2 cards in particular, which people have heavily underrated, which I made sure to reserve judgment on because I wasn't convinced, based on the power level shift from first to second edition, that these were actually as bad as people were going to say. And I feel very much from seeing them on the table, see how they function, that both Sunterfell and Palp are still good cards. Guys, seriously, I know a lot of you are down on these. But I was seriously impressed by how both of these performed. In the very first game I played a Sunterfell, Vader, and Palp on an Omicron shuttle. It all felt really good. Now, in the situations where my opponent would blank out, yes, that's not ideal, and I know that can happen. Sometimes you'll get 3 blanks on Sunterfell's dice roll, and that feels really, really bad. But my experience was Sunterfell is a very capable pilot. Double repositioning is fantastic. There are no turrets that can just fire 360 anymore. He's in a much better place. And when you pilot him well, you get those free focus tokens. You can still get focus evade. That's still a thing he can do. And I feel like the power level shift is good for him. Yes, I know he can't turtle anymore, but capitalizing on the way he flies and being in a scenario where bombs are not working with such perfect information, turrets are not so oppressive, Sunterfell feels like he's in a really good place. And Palp. What we've got to remember with Palp is he's actually got more powerful and less powerful at the same time. Because yes, he only flips focus results, but now he does work in response to dice rolls rather than having to guess before a dice roll. And that has proven really well. I actually really liked the way he interacted with Vader of all things. Because Vader had a lot of different resources in his 3 Force tokens. And giving him basically access to 1 more Force token meant he had just a little bit more flexibility, even though that Force token was on a different ship. It was just very, very interesting. Also, this list also benefited from the fact that the Lambda class shuttle can shoot backwards. It wasn't a huge deal, it's only 2 red dice. But it means it's just 1 more tool it has on its belt. It means when a ship gets behind it, it's just not completely dead in the water. I really like the way this list flies. I want to see it again. I want to see people brewing with this because I think Palp Ace is interesting. I love that Vader Sunterfell and Palp is potentially a thing again because that was one of the very early Palp Aces list. Fun times, fun times. I also want to have a chat about the way bombing works because I was lucky enough to use the bombing list that I talked about before against a Whisper list, and Whisper is very, very interesting. Now, I didn't win against this list, but I really enjoyed the way the system phase worked, and I'm glad I got to play in a game where the system phase really mattered because Whisper got to decloak in response to my bombing. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of rebalancing bombing. The fact that Eamon Azamine can drop a bomb in 1 of 4 different places, and he gets the option of dropping bombs that either latch onto an asteroid at range 1 or don't, means he has so much flexibility, but he doesn't have the information to play with. You basically have to use it as a zoning tactic. You have to try and zone out the worst part of the map that your opponent is basically forced to fly in or forced to use up their resources to get out of. Against aces, that's really good. Even against Whisper, that's good, but it doesn't just blank out Whisper anymore because you can't react to Whisper decloaking. It almost feels like FFG looked at the rules for decloaking, well, the rules that they changed for decloaking where it has to happen before anyone else flies, and thought, that worked really well for decloaking, let's do that with bombing too. And the way that mashes together and interacts with initiative, I'm so thrilled with that. It just all makes a lot of sense. Actually, that list I flew against had Whisper and Sunterfell, so I had basically 2 different styles of challenges in terms of bombing. And I was actually lucky. I did manage to kill that Sunterfell with a proton bomb, which feels really, really good, as you can imagine. I actually lost against the list overall, but yeah, just very, very interesting. And when I came to fly against the Rebel Jank list, well, first of all, it was Wedge, Nora, Arvel, and 10 Num, so we got like the battle of the second Death Star in a list. I love that. I love that actual real characters are getting a bit more spotlight now. I found I fared much better against that list because I had a lot of versatility. My bombing was very effective against 4 ships that didn't have as much flexibility as Imperial Aces. Wedge was very potent when he had his boost and his barrel roll online, but not to the same level as Sunterfell. There is now a clear difference between the way Sunterfell flies and any other ace in the game because he has all of that repositioning, and Wedge only has 2 green dice and doesn't have any defensive mods from his pilot ability. And in that case, I fared better against that list. But overall, I don't feel like the matchups were as spiky as they were before. I felt like I could have beaten both of those Imperial lists if I had planned better, if I improved my build quality, that kind of stuff. I felt like both of those Imperial lists were firing on all cylinders, apart from Suntia flying into a proton bomb. But apart from that, it was just all very cohesive, efficient, the way the Empire should fly. And the Rebel list just going for a bit more of a mid-range strategy, trying to be a jack of all trades, just couldn't adapt to the absolute ferociousness of the bombs and the attack efficiency of the fire sprays. And that was really, really interesting. And yeah, again in the comment section, guys, how was your first day of X-Wing 2nd Edition? If you haven't had the chance yet, let me know as well. Hopefully we'll all have a chance over the next week or so if there were any distribution issues in your country. Let me know. Really, really enjoying the format so far. It feels really fluid. It feels really clean. It feels like there's still a lot of fun, spiky things we can do, but overall it's a lot more balanced. And I just really like the way all the different mechanics work. I love the cohesion of the factions, all this kind of stuff. Very happy with how it is so far. Anyway, guys, we'll talk a bit more about apps in the next video. But in the meantime, like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Reddit. And I'll catch you guys later on.